the Atlas V Silent Barker NRO 107 launch. I'm joining you from ULA's Advanced Spaceflight Operations Center at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Liftoff is scheduled for 8:47 a.m. Eastern.
Status check. Go Atlas.
Go Centaur.
Go Silent Barker, NRO 107.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have ignition, 2, 1, and liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket carrying Silent Barker NRO 107 for the National Reconnaissance Office and the United States Space Force. Launch vehicle ascent data.
SRBs are rolling off.
Booster has begun throttling back up to 100%, so we hit the 2.5 G throttle segment. Engine response
burnout. All 5 SRBs are rolling off.
Down the middle.
Approaching 0. RD-180 continues to operate normally. About 10 seconds to jettison. RD-180 continues to operate normally. And we have jettisoned all 5 SRBs. And the vehicle is now in closed loop guidance, as expected. RD-180 continues to operate normally, executing a throttle profile as expected. There are 2 minutes to nominal beat go. Next event we're looking for is throttling down to 2.5 G constant acceleration in preparation for fairing separation. We fired the pyro valves, activating the reaction control system on the second stage, coming up on fairing jettison. Fairing jet, and see how far separation is completed as well. Throttling back up.
This is Atlas Mission Control at T plus 3.5 minutes. We just heard flight commentator Rob Gannon confirm the successful completion of the early phase of today's flight, and all systems continue to operate nominally. At this time, we'll end our live coverage. For more information on the Atlas V vehicle, visit ulalaunch.com. I'm Pam Ziert. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Okay, I'll start with Dr. Scalise. Dr. Scalise was sworn in as the director of the National Reconnaissance Office in 2019. He's the 19th director of NRO and the first to be presidentially appointed and Senate confirmed. Dr. Scalise provides direction, guidance, and supervision on matters pertaining to the NRO and executes other authorities specifically delegated by the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence. Before his time at the NRO, he had a distinguished career with NASA. Lieutenant General Michael Gutlein is the commander of the Space Force's Space Systems Command, where he's responsible for approximately 15,000 employees nationwide and an annual budget of $11 billion. He manages research, design, development, acquisition, launch, and sustainment of satellites and their associated command and control systems across more than 20 geographically dispersed units. He has a distinguished military career of more than 3 decades, including serving as our Deputy Director at NRO from 2019 to 2021. And then Mr. Tory Bruno is the President and CEO of United Launch Alliance. Under his leadership, ULA is transformed into a competitive powerhouse that is shaping the future of space launch by making it more affordable, accessible, and introducing revolutionary new capabilities to meet the challenges of the future. Each of the panelists will now take a few moments to share some opening remarks. I'll begin with you, Dr. Scalise.
Thank you, Andrea, and good morning, everybody. It's always great to be here on the day before a launch. It's even better on the day of a launch, and it's great to be here with 2 fantastic colleagues, General Gutlein and Tory Bruno. We've worked together for many years across a number of different missions. At the NRO, you know, we work to provide the nation and the world's best intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities from space. And this upcoming launch, NRO L-107, Silent Barker, is a continuation of that. And it's even more because it indicates a extremely close partnership with our colleagues in the Space Force. Working together, we've developed a system in a relatively short amount of time that's going to provide us with unprecedented coverage of what's going on in the GeoBelt, so that we can understand the intentions of other countries, to see what they're doing in the GeoBelt, to see if there's any indications of threats or if it's just normal operations. That capability will just allow us to have increased understanding of what's going on there. So we look forward very much to the launch that's coming up in tomorrow. And now I'll turn it over to General Gutlein.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Today is, or tomorrow actually, is going to be a very historic day. If you look at 2019, we stood up the United States Space Force because space was becoming not only congested, but worse yet, contested. And one of the ways that we're getting after space in this contested environment is through partnerships. Our partnership with our external stakeholders is absolutely critical to our success. And most importantly, our #1 partner is the NRO. So this is a commitment to our partnership between the Title 10 and the Title 50 stakeholders. And the capability that we're going to launch tomorrow goes a long way towards giving us the competitive endurance, competitive advantage in space to make sure we can not only maintain, but not only see, but maintain custody of the threats in GEO. And has been a very strong partnership with the NRO getting this capability together, and I look forward to the launch tomorrow. Tory?
Thank you. Well, before I start, I have to say that the bios don't do this justice. These 2 gentlemen are absolutely amazing leaders. I've known them for a long time. You could not have a better partner in any kind of important national security space mission. This is an important area for us. For me personally, I care a great deal about what we do, and I'm just honored to be up here with you guys. The launch is going to be cool. This is our bruiser configuration of the Atlas. That means it's got 5 solid rocket motors on it. When you hear 4, 3, 2, 1 ignition, do not blink, because it will leap off the pad. We'll be pulling more than a G before we clear the top of that tower. About a minute and a half in, we're going to have fully expended 500,000 pounds of the solid propellant. We're going to drop those solids off. At 3.5 minutes, we'll have crossed the Kármán line with the first stage and be all the way into space. We'll let go of the payload fairing at that point. And a minute later, we will actually be entering the LEO regime on the booster at over 20,000 miles per hour. We'll hand it off to the Centaur. It will conduct a whole series of very complex orbital maneuvers to put this payload directly injected into a high energy orbit. My rocket scientists love this mission because it is what Atlas was designed to do, and no other rocket does it better. And personally, this mission, it means a lot to me, as it does to everyone on your teams, I'm sure. There are folks out there working very hard every day to make Earth orbit a rough neighborhood. And this is going to do a lot to keep it the safe high ground, peaceful high ground that it is meant to be. And so I thank you for entrusting this to us. We will not let you down.
And liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket, carrying Silent Barker NRO 107 for the National Reconnaissance Office and the United States Space Force.
As the chamber pressures continue to climb out, we have entered our first throttle bucket for the RD-180. Everything is looking good. Coming up on 30 seconds into the mission. PU has gone to closed loop control. Completed pitch program. Mach 1. Vehicle's now supersonic. Coming up on max Q. Max dynamic pressure. And we're throttling up. On the R180s, dosing normal burn profile on the SRBs. Approximately 10 seconds, we'll be throttling down for SRB burnout. Body rates look good, acceleration looks good.
Thank you. Maybe this is for Chris. I mean, can you give us any more? I'm not talking about details about Silent Barker, but maybe a more general picture of what the spacecraft does besides what's in the press handout. It's hard. I mean, I don't know what space domain awareness is to the average person on the street. So, I mean, just some general terms on that. I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Certainly, Bill. So the idea of the mission is to put a satellite in geosynchronous orbit and then to be looking at that orbital regime and get a sense of what's happening day to day. So, and satellites do move in geosynchronous orbit. You've heard about communication satellites moving from one location to another to provide better coverage for other areas. Certainly we want to be able to see that so we know what is going on in that area. But we also want to know if there is something going on that is unexpected or shouldn't be going on that could potentially represent a threat to a high value asset, either ours or one of our allies. So that's the purpose of it. It's really to be a watchdog in that orbital regime, in the geosynchronous orbit. And when you think about it, geosynchronous orbit is about 24,000 miles, 40,000 kilometers away from the Earth, so it's pretty hard to see from the ground. So having something that is in that orbit provides us much better coverage, and it will allow Space Force, NRO, and others to have a much better understanding of what's going on in the geosynchronous orbit.
Question for Tori, I suppose, and for the other partners if you'd like to add to. This is the last NRO mission that Atlas is going to be flying, as ULA begins to transition into Vulcan. If you could just speak about both from a high level, the significance of making that transition and also the technological transition of going from Atlas to Vulcan, with these national security missions. Obviously, there were certification flights before then, but, just marking the moment.
Sure. Great question. It's bittersweet. I mean, we've done 97 national security space missions. I believe 33, if I have the number right, just for the NRO. And this will be Atlas's final mission for NRO. So, in the 551 configuration, this is such an exciting mission. It's our mission that we're designed for, so it's kind of a fitting way to end that. So, but it means a lot to our guys. You're going to see people with a little tear in the corner of their eye. However, we move from here to Vulcan. And Vulcan will have actually more capability than Atlas, a little bit more than the Delta IV Heavy in a single stick. So as we transition forward, we're going to bring more things that we can do to contribute to the fight and to the peace. And we'll be flying that hopefully in Q4, and we'll continue on the great legacy of Atlas. In a way, it's kind of like an Atlas 6 of Vulcan is. Think of it that way.
Great, thank you very much. I think my question is probably for General Gutlein or Dr. Scalise. First of all, can you tell us anything about the number of spacecraft? Is this just one spacecraft, or is it multiple? And if so, can you say how many are in this constellation for Silent Barker? And secondly, the NRO often, almost always, has their missions, to be fully classified. You're talking a little bit about what Silent Barker is doing. Wondering if General Gutlein or Dr. Scalise could talk about the decision to open up about this particular mission, why talk about the details about Silent Barker, whereas you don't do that with other missions. Thanks.
I think we're trying to be more transparent and share more information. Clearly, the space domain is, we often say it's contested, congested, etc. Competitive. It's also becoming easier and easier to see what's going up there, and we want to let people know to some extent what our capabilities are, and this is one capability that if you think about it, has great value beyond just the national security community, and oftentimes it's forgotten that the NRO and I'll let General Gutlein talk about Space Force, but the NRO supports more than just the national security community, the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. It also supports the civil community. A number of civil agencies rely on the data from NRO satellites to deal with natural disasters and things along those lines, humanitarian assistance. In this case, it's going to provide us with a lot more understanding of what's going on in space, to understand what is happening up there. So that's a critical capability that I think people should be aware that we're doing. I don't know, General.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So a huge part of the Space Force mission is not only to defend, but to deter aggression. A huge element of deterrence is the ability for the adversary to know what we can and cannot see. So we actually want our competitors to know that we have eyes in GEO and that we can see what's happening in GEO. And not only are we going to maintain the custody and to be able to detect what's going on in GEO, but we'll have the indications and warnings to know there's something out of the normal occurring. And that goes a long way towards deterrence.
Tyrants want to work in the dark, and you're going to shed light on them.
That's a good way to say it.
Good way to say it.
Yeah, and Stephen, to answer your question, it's multiple payloads, but we're not sharing exact numbers. More than one, as Dr. Scalise has said in the past. Okay.
Hey, thanks. Good morning. Dr. Scalise, Lieutenant General Gutlein, could you talk a little bit about sort of the run-up to this mission, the history of the spacecraft? When did NRO and Space Force and other partners realize you guys wanted this capability, and how long did it take to get to this point? And then looking forward a little bit, how long are the payloads expected to operate? Thanks a lot.
Sure. So I would say, Mike, was about 5 years ago that both organizations, both Space Force and NRO, realized that we needed a better understanding of what was going on in the GeoBelt. And since we both recognize it somewhat independently, we routinely get together. We have a fairly tight relationship where we work together on planning for missions, and realized that we were both kind of looking in the same direction and decided to team up together. After we did that, we quickly developed a capability, and about 3 years from the time that we had decided what we wanted to do, about 3 years ago is when we decided what we really wanted to do, to now. So it's about a 3-year development to build these satellites, and I guess that pretty much kind of captures the history of what was going on with it. Mike, did you want to add anything to it?
Yeah, so when we looked at the mission, we both are operating in GEO. We both needed the indications and warnings. We both needed to know what was going on in GEO. And it really was a perfect match because the NRO is really good at building satellites for ISR. And what we were really asking for was an ISR satellite in GEO to not only detect but to maintain custody of what's happening in GEO. So by leveraging the NRO's mission domain experience in ISR, as well as their acquisition authorities, in partnership with Space Force's ability to have assured access to space, it really was a great partnership.
I wonder if you guys could tell us, anchoring in space, of course, can you tell us maybe in general terms, what's different or enhanced about these capabilities of this satellite? And is it a completely new design and it detects satellites in space, or is it just
It is a completely new design. We do strive to advance technology where we can. We utilize what's available, and we rely on commercial capabilities as well. But in this particular case, we recognize that we needed to do something, very different. The geosynchronous orbit is far away, as I said, and ground-based systems have a harder time seeing what's up there. So this provides us the capability of being in the same orbit, so that we're closer to what's happening up there. And it will not be looking at the ground, it will be looking at space. So it is looking at space. Mike, did you want to add anything?
No, sir, you got it right. So today we primarily rely on our ground-based radars. Our ground-based radars are pretty exquisite, but they pretty much can only see about a basketball-size object in space. And because of the challenges of day, night, and weather, it gets extremely hard to maintain custody of those objects. So by actually moving the sensor into orbit with those objects, we can actually not only detect smaller objects, but maintain custody of them. And when they operate out of the norm, we get indications of warning that there's something here that helps us to maintain in a contested environment, that we can understand when our high-value assets, think of strategic missile warning that's also up there, that those objects might be in harm's way and that we need to take a different action. So by getting closer to the environment, we can actually see more objects and maintain custody of those objects.
So this sounds like a huge increase in capability.
It is.
It is.
It's exponential.
Yes.
From a little basketball to a giant, huge increase in capability, from a little basketball-sized thing to a gigantic satellite.
It is, and not necessarily the size of the object, but maintaining all-weather, day-night capability, and being able to maintain 100% custody of those objects as they maneuver in and around GEO.
Right.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you. I wanted to ask real quick just about if you can say anything about the health of the current legacy SBSS constellation, the satellites that are still in orbit, and then also, we've heard a lot lately from Space Command about the need for dynamic space operations, and understanding that this is kind of a newer requirement that's being talked about more now. I'm curious how Silent Barker satellites, fit into that vision, and if these satellites will be able to provide that sort of maneuverability, or if that's sort of like a, as you look at future capabilities for Silent Barker, if how you consider that need, from Space Command.
Well, I mean, you captured it very well, actually, in your question. What Silent Barker is going to do is provide that indications and warnings, so it can inform decisions about what we do or don't need to do in terms of maneuver or awareness. So it's a great increase in our understanding of what we'll be able to do, and will greatly improve our ability to determine future courses of action. And it's really important. I mean, Space Command is absolutely correct in saying that space has become a much more dynamic environment. When you think of the number of satellites that are up there, the importance of space to everything we do, from communications to navigation, to weather prediction, which we're relying on very much for tomorrow, to understanding disaster, when there's potential for a natural disaster. So space is becoming increasingly important, and having increased awareness is very important. It also requires us to operate in closer conjunction with each other so that we can stay out of each other's way, but also so we can operate very efficiently in space. And that's what we do. We work very closely with the Space Command as well on those types of things. I think I captured most of your question, but I'll...
Yeah, and Courtney, on the question of SPSS, we can't comment on the current status of an operational asset. Over.
Thank you. Can you talk at all about the sharing arrangements, especially with international partners?
Well, that's the sharing usually it goes through Space Command typically, and yes, we do share information with international partners.
So, Marcia, I think an easier way of saying it is that this data will come to the DoD. The DoD will use this data to continue to maintain the space catalog and provide that space catalog free to not only our commercial partners but our international partners. So this data will allow us to have a better defined space catalog of the objects in geosynchronous orbit and of what the behavior of those objects is. Over.
Great. I'm wondering if any information can be shared about which manufacturers or contractors have been working on the Silent Barker program or who might be working on it going forward. Thank you.
I'm sorry we can't share that information at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay.